Welcome to day 22 of your Acceleration Challenge. Today we're going to build upon the conversation that we've been doing the last few weeks. We start on the foundation, who you are, where you want to go, why it's so important to you. Then we added the code, real, raw, relevant results. How is it that we actually get results in our lives? By putting facts before feelings. And then we built upon that and added the core four. How is it that we put ourselves in a position to win every single day? Talking about body, being, balance, and business. And today, another tool for that tool belt. We're going to introduce you to something called the shift. Now, what is the shift? Before I explain to you what the shift is, we're going to talk about something specific. I'm going to tell you a story about me and my experience in Krav Maga. Now, if you're not sure what Krav Maga is, that's okay. Most people don't know what it is. Israeli martial arts. Think about it like jiu-jitsu on steroids, right? Well, I joined a Krav Maga gym about 3 years ago here locally. When I started going, I got paired up with a retired firefighter. Now, he's retired, he's 55, a little bit older than me, a little bit shorter than me, a little bit lighter than me, right? But we got paired up and we hit it off right away. Now, we don't always do jiu-jitsu, but this particular day we were practicing jiu-jitsu. Now, the difference between he and I, other than, of course, I'm better looking, but the difference between he and I is that he had years of experience practicing jiu-jitsu. And so we're rolling around on the mat, training one day. And I had him on the ground, on bottom position, and I was on top of him. And he said, "Are you ready for this?" He's smiling at me the whole time. He's like, "Are you ready for this?" I'm like, "Ready for what?" He's like, "I'm going to do some stuff." I'm like, "Okay, fine, whatever." Right? Now, let me remind you, I'm stronger than he is, and I'm bigger than he is. Well, he proceeds to use some maneuvers, and now I end up in bottom position, and he's on top of me. Well, I don't like to be in bottom position. I used to wrestle, and that's not a good position to be in. And so I proceeded to try and throw him off of me, which I did get him into the air, but he came right back on top of me, right? Kind of laughed a little bit. He said, "Now look, when I tell you to tap, you need to tap." And I'm like, "Whatever. I don't even know what that means." And so he proceeds to work on my arm and get me into position where he wants to create an arm bar, right? And he's slowly moving me into this position and eventually gets me to the point where it doesn't matter how hard or how strong I am, but he's got leverage on me and proceeds to pull, and then I tap, right? Now, this was a very important lesson for me because everything around Krav Maga is not about being the strongest. It's all around technique, right? And it's the same thing when we deal with issues inside of our lives. It's not those who are the strongest who overcome the issues. It's those who leverage the best technique. And that's what we're going to be teaching you here inside of the shift. Now, what is the shift, right? The shift is going to help you deal with something that happens every single day. You get triggered, right? You get triggered by your spouse, by your kids, by your employees, by your customers, by your clients, by your neighbors, by the school bus driver. It doesn't matter. Triggers are everywhere. They're internal, they're external, they're everywhere, right? And when you get triggered, you're going to respond a certain way. Some of you respond by ignoring it. Some of you stuff it down deep down inside and pretend it's not there. Some of you yell. Some of you get angry. Some of you pretend that didn't happen. Some of you want to get revenge on everyone and everything, whoever harmed you. You have a list in your bedroom. Some of you hold a grudge. And some of you shut down and completely isolate yourself. It doesn't matter what you do, but what you're doing is you're initiating a sequence of events that the trigger started, right? Now, here's the crazy part. No one can expose you better than you. Let me repeat that. No one can expose you better than you. And so the shift is going to expose you for not just who you are, but how you react to situations. Okay? Now, what is the definition of insanity? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And what normally happens inside of your life is you deal with things the exact same way. And you wonder why you don't make progress inside of your marriage. You wonder why you don't make progress with your employees. You wonder why you don't make progress with your anger and all the other issues that you've been dealing with. It's because you haven't been taught a tool to escape this cycle of insanity. I'm going to talk more about that, okay? Now, what is the shift? The shift is a tool to help you process a trigger in your life. And you can only deal with one trigger at a time, but it helps you deal with trigger after trigger after trigger after trigger. process the trigger instead of bury the trigger, instead of hide the trigger, instead of pretend that the trigger isn't there. Now, what does the trigger do? The trigger, and I'm going to teach you the process that we're going to kind of go through here and what the shift encompasses, right? The trigger throws you into the dark. Now, what is the dark? The dark is a really scary place, right? It's a scary place because we don't want to be there, right? But inside of the dark, we have an opportunity to drift. Now, for most people, the drift is a downward trajectory that you don't control. I'm going to teach you how to control that. But the trigger throws us into the dark, and then we start to drift downward into the darkness, into the pit of misery, right? Now, inside of the shift, we're going to teach you how to shift. Shift your downward trajectory. Control where it is that you're going, right? Which will eventually allow you to lift. Lift yourself out of the pit that you keep finding yourself in. And then ultimately lead you back to the light, which is the one thing that we're all after, right? So these are the different phases or aspects of the shift, right? And inside of this whole thing will come a gift, will come an insight, will come a lesson, will come something to you, right? Ultimately, you are controlling your mind, and therefore you are controlling your momentum. And we're going to teach you exactly how to do that, right? So the obstacle that you have will help you find the solution that you want, right? So what is your tendency? Is your tendency to stuff it or to shift it, right? And we're going to teach you how to start to shift away from these things, process these things, instead of stuffing them away only to try and pretend like you're going to deal with them later, right? So remember this, the obstacle is the way. In the military, there's this term, work the problem, right? What does work the problem mean? It means that the answer is found within the problem. The shift is a real life application of that. It's going to show you how to take the trigger, the thing that is making you angry, pissed off, frustrated, confused, sad, whatever it is, and then process it in a way that a lesson, a beautiful gift comes out of it at the end of it. All right? So that leads us to today's assignment. It's a two-parter. Number one, how is it that you deal with the triggers in your life right now? Again, do you ignore it? Do you hide it? Do you pretend that it doesn't exist? Do you yell? Do you get angry? How is it that you deal with the triggers in your life right now? Okay? Now, the second thing that I want you to do is record a 2-minute video where you talk about how is it that you that you deal with the triggers in your life. All right, you know what time it is. It's time to get after it. 3, 2, 1, off you go.